All right, we're live here. We're recording. We're not live yet. We're just recording. So just be careful what you say. And we're backwards. And I don't know how to fix that on this computer.
They're over there where they belong. They're fine.
I'm gonna sit over here. I'm gonna sit here so I can let people in.
We can't see, yeah.
That's fine.
Okay.
I don't need to be seen.
All five of us, okay.
Yeah. There. Now we have Nancy.
Now we look like we have a mass of people.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm a little gingerly today. I had some surgery on Thursday.
I heard, yeah. Sorry.
Hernia operation.
Oh, yeah. Bruce had that. He had a, what do you know?
Yeah.
And they put a mesh on him.
Yeah, they put a mesh on mine too, right over here. How's everyone today, though? Everyone well? Good to hear. I don't have anything else. I'm going to give Melissa a couple minutes and see if she'll join us today, or Janice might join us as well. Janice heads home and then joins us for Sunday school. She's here.
Yeah. So,
How are you, Nancy?
was she in church?
I did not see. Was Karen here?
No.
I saw Ray, but I didn't see
Oh,
Karen.
really?
No, she's still, she's doing quite a bit of pain.
Is she?
Yeah.
Did everything go well with her?
It did, yeah.
But she's done more.
But
She saw more?
She's got more, they did the arm.
Oh, okay.
That arm was a mess to begin with. After her surgery, they tried to put a sleeve on her, and it was a problem.
When
So
was
they
that
took it
surgery?
off, and then by then her arm had swelled.
When was that surgery?
Oh, it's been several years.
Several years.
Way before your time.
So they're kind of just fixing the problem right now. Is that really what would happen?
I don't know. She seems to be a cancer maker. Makes them here and there and everywhere.
Well, we'll keep her in our prayers.
Yes.
And then Joyce, our dear friend who was confirmed by the bishop this last December,
Oh, yeah.
she broke her kneecap.
Oh, gosh. I thought only the mafia did that.
Right. So she will be in surgery this week as well. Thursday, I think, some surgery. So we'll keep her in our prayers as well. And there's a couple people sick.
Karen's granddaughter, I was having surgery with her tonsils out.
Oh, is she okay?
Tuesday.
Okay.
Bill Heath is in ongoing radiation.
Yeah, Bill's still, yeah, is he started?
Oh, yeah, he's started.
It's supposed to be done.
Okay, good. All right. Well, I don't know if anybody else is joining us, but let's go ahead and start. We will look today at the gospel reading. Begin with, because that's where I like to start. If we have the choice, I always go to the stories of Jesus and look at the gospels here. And this is one of my favorite stories. I love this narrative. I love the language of the narrative and all its three different forms that we find it in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. They all tell the story, but they all tell it a little bit differently. And I love looking at the story and seeing how they change little details, or what details they include and don't put in, and kind of why that happens. But anyway, this is Mark's version because this is the year we're reading the Gospel of Mark. 6 days later, Jesus took Peter, James, and John and went up on a high mountain. They were all alone there. And while these followers watched him, Jesus was changed. His clothes became shining white, whiter than anyone on earth could make them. Then 2 men were there talking with Jesus, Elijah and Moses. Peter said to Jesus, "Teacher, it is good that we are here. We will put 3 tents here, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." Peter did not know what to say because he and the other 2 followers were so afraid. Then a cloud came and covered them. A voice came from the cloud and said, "This is my son, the one I love. Obey him." The followers looked, but they saw only Jesus there alone with them. As Jesus and the followers were walking back down the mountain, he gave them these instructions. "Do not tell anyone what you saw upon the mountain. Wait until after the Son of Man rises from the dead. Then you can tell people what you saw." All right. As we talk about this over the next few minutes, I will be inputting some translational differences I have with this text. Yeah, I'm not honestly not a big fan of this translation. I just read this now.
I did not know what to say. You just
So-
said something.
Yeah, what? Well, yeah. I mean, from the beginning. So, while these followers watched him, Jesus was changed. Okay, changed. There's not an incorrect word, but we have to be careful about English because, it's not like changing your clothes. This isn't what this means. The word there in the Greek it literally is transfigured. It became a figure of something else. Okay, so it's not just about that kind of an outward appearance. It's about something deeper. So that word change there, again, it's not a wrong word at all. It doesn't convey, I don't think, the deepest sense of what is happening here. And then he became shining white. The Greek, and I like, the reason I prefer a different translation here is because it connects to another scene. Do you remember the scene when Moses saw the burning bush and what happened to Moses' hair? It became dazzling white. That's why I like that word dazzling better, right? It conveys that connection, and there is a connection being made because here we are in the presence of God, and that's the point of what's going on here. When it says it became shining white or dazzling white, this is the presence of the Almighty. This is the presence of Yahweh at play here. Whiter than anyone on earth could make them. That word "make" there in the Greek, literally, again, this isn't bad, it's not wrong, but the word "make" actually in the Greek is to bleach. So whiter than anyone on earth could bleach them, right? Is what was being said here. And then there were 2 men talking with Jesus, Elijah and Moses. So then the rest isn't bad. But anyway, so as I like to do, what did you hear when you hear that reading? When you hear that story, even if it's from Mark's version, Luke's version, Matthew's version, what strikes you in this scene of the Transfiguration?
The total awesomeness of, I guess.
Oh yeah, it's a majestic story, right? There's an awesomeness to it. Yeah, I know, I hear you. Yeah. There's almost that language is this apocalyptic kind of mythic kind of quality to the story. That I agree. I really do love that. That is reminiscent of some of the Old Testament stories too, right? Of Elijah and Elisha, of Moses, and their encounters with the divine as well.
Sounds about it. But I still don't understand why this translation says, then Peter said to Jesus, "Teacher, it is good that we are here." And we put up 3 tents. That part I remember. But now this other part, Peter did not know what to say because he and other two of the followers were so afraid.
So they were afraid of what they were afraid of the full awesomeness of what was happening in that scene. This is a fear of I don't want to say it's a fear of that kind of scared fear, like that being the Halloween scary kind of fear. It's this fear of what does this all mean, right? For the Messiah, for this one who like in the scene, if you recall, in chapter 8, so this is chapter 9, 2 through 9. In chapter 8, what happens in chapter 8? In chapter 8 of Mark's gospel is when Peter confesses that Jesus is Lord, a Messiah. So that's Peter's confession happens in chapter 8. And immediately after that, now this happens. So this is who the Messiah will be, right? And this is who the Messiah is, right? This one who is transfigured, changed before them. And so that leads to this kind of this fear of something that is not exactly what they expect.
Still, no white horse.
Yeah, no white horse. Yeah, no army behind him to rout the Romans. This is a different Messiah.
Well, and when you consider what Peter and friends were brought up on, there's a whole big thing going on inside their head.
Yeah, there's this conflict, right,
Sure.
between what they expect and what is playing out before them.
Yeah, being covered with a cloud and hearing voices.
Right. I mean, if you look at the scenes, like when in the Gospels, like look at the scene in Luke's Gospel when Mary is overshadowed by the Holy Spirit, right? There's a fear there that the angel has to reassure her, right? In Matthew, Joseph, the angel has to reassure Joseph, right? In much of the Old Testament, when the divine presence appears before the prophets or before Moses, before well, not before David. David was a little arrogant, but before Moses and the prophets, there's always a sense of do not be afraid. It is I. So there's a sense of having to calm them down.
Well, also an angel appeared to shepherds in the same kind of thing.
Yeah, the shepherds, right? Yeah, the shepherds in Luke's narrative. The shepherds are afraid, and he has to remind them to not be afraid of what is happening. And what is happening?
An inherent fear of the unknown that everybody has.
Yeah, there's this fear of the unknown, the fear of kind of an unknown mystery.
What do you? Yeah, is this what I think or not what I think?
Yeah, an unknown presence. Yeah. And what does this all mean? And part of what's happening here when Peter then says, Lord, it is good for us to be here. He recognizes that this is a good place for them to be. But then Peter wants to contain that. He wants to contain the mystery. He wants to put the Lord, he wants to put Jesus' messiahship along with the law and the prophets into tents. So that they can dwell with them, so that he can contain them, right? Rather than allowing that to be what it needs to be, right? Jesus doesn't allow that, right? He basically says, don't tell anybody about it yet. You don't quite understand, so don't tell anybody about it yet. You'll understand after I rise from the dead, and that's when you can share the story. Because then it'll make sense to you. Yeah. And I love in Mark's gospel, in this narrative here. So, as opposed to the other gospels, and we can talk about the other gospels as well, but the mountaintop experiences in the gospels are important, right? They frame the gospel in many ways, right? In Mark's gospel, there are two mountaintop experiences. This one and Calvary, the mountain on Calvary, right? Two mountain experiences, right? Where the one where Jesus is transfigured is the reality of his sonship. His divine sonship is made known on one, and then the reality of his divine sonship is made known on the other as well, in his death, right? So there's the kind of corresponding one. In Matthew and Luke, there are a lot more. In Matthew's whole gospel is framed by these mountaintop experiences, right? Matthew begins the gospel, the Mount of Beatitudes, He has the Mount of Transfiguration, he has the Mount of Calvary, but Matthew also has the mountain in Galilee, where he appears to the disciples and sends them on their way, right? So all these mountaintop experiences, they frame who Jesus is and what Jesus is about in the gospel. So always pay attention to those experiences on the mountain in the gospel. Let's see what else here. Yeah, go
I
ahead.
notice in this translation, maybe, God says, "Oh, this is my son, obey him."
Yeah, it's not a
Some
great
translations
translation
say,
either.
Listen to him.
Yeah, it should be that. I think it should be probably listen to him rather than obey. It has the same kind of connotation. But one of the things that Mark is trying to do here, and that Luke and Matthew do as well, it's about listening to what Jesus is saying. What is Jesus telling his disciples in this moment? Like, again, going back to the scene immediately before where Peter had just confessed who Jesus was, Jesus basically says, yeah, you're right, to Peter, right? So when they're on the mountain now, he says, listen to him. Listen to my son. He just told you who he was and what must happen to him. You need to listen. I'm prepared for that. I don't really like the translation, the one I love, because the word is in the Greek is subjective passive. It should be the one, this is my son, the beloved. Okay? Because what happens there is then the action is put on the one being loved, right? The beloved. And it also helps us create the connection again between Jesus and the other son of God in the Old Testament, David. And that's a clear connection being made between the two beloveds, David and Jesus in this context, in the story. Yeah. And then Moses and Elijah, of course, the law and the prophets, okay, appear together. And then
Wait a minute, did they have IDs on? How do we know who they were?
well, so again, this is a narrative, and so we just kind of have to trust the narrative. And I mean, they would have recognized. I mean, it's an experience that they're having, right? With Jesus. Were they labeled? I don't know. I doubt it. But we just kind of have to trust the narrative that they recognized Jesus, and Jesus appearing beside the law and the prophets, the two sides of the Jewish covenant, right? Now being fulfilled in Jesus, and we can recognize the fulfillment aspect in Mark's story by a very simple line that we can kind of throw out, perhaps. Because then the followers looked, but they only saw Jesus there with them. So the law and the prophets were subsumed into Jesus, who's now alone with them. So Jesus is, this is a way of Mark telling us that this is the fulfillment of that which came earlier, of the covenant promise. Luke and Matthew are a little bit more direct in how they phrase that language in their narratives and make it a little bit more clear. Luke's being a little bit more subtle here, I think, but still framing it such that Jesus is indeed fulfilling the law and the prophets as he moves forward. What else? When they walk back down the mountain, we can't stay on the mountaintop. Much as we want to, we can't stay on the mountaintop. We have to go back down on the mountain.
That's somewhat like Curcio.
Yeah, exactly. These spiritual experiences that we have, the highs, like Curcio movement or any of these retreats, we can't stay there. We have to go back down the mountain to enter back into our journey and the life that we live together. But don't tell anyone. This is the Messianic secret, again, in Mark's gospel. Don't tell anyone. Of course, what did they do?
Tell
Probably went
everyone.
and told everyone. Because that's what people will want to do when they're told not to do something.
I never get there, why Jesus always says, don't tell.
Well, all right,
Not
so
ready to hear it yet.
in Mark's gospel, there is a reason. So in Mark's gospel, the reason that I think, this is kind of my theological take, is that for Mark, the full reality of who Jesus is and what Jesus has come to do cannot be fully known until the cross. And so if the cross has not yet occurred, they cannot possibly know the full reality of what's happening. So he says, don't even try. Don't tell anyone yet. Until when? Until the Son of Man rises from the dead. So until after the cruciform experience, until after the self-giving act of love. Don't tell anyone. Does that help? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, that being said, we know all along that they're telling everybody, right? They're not listening to Jesus. Right? They're not obeying Jesus here in this story. Yeah.
But he knows that's what they're going to do.
He knows that's what they're going to do. Yeah. 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 I love this story. I love this story because of its. It is a vast story. I mentioned that in my sermon today. Just this whole idea, this whole thing. This is just the immensity of who God is, right? In this transfiguration, that Jesus is that divine light, the divine energy that permeates the whole cosmos, and that's who's being revealed here on the mountain, right? And that, like Peter, James, and John, we're invited to enter into that experience, to live that experience of being with the transfigured Jesus. Now, we're also invited to not be like Peter, James, and John, and not try to contain the experience intense, right? But to take that experience with us, as we go forth, as we go out into the world. I was reading an article recently. I sometimes dabble and test my head against physics, which usually doesn't end well for me. But I was reading an article recently about light, and about that light in a physical sense is the default. Right? That darkness doesn't exist on its own. Darkness exists when you take light out. Right? So it's an interesting concept, right? So when we say that Jesus is the light of the world, Jesus is the default. And the darkness, the absence of Jesus exists when we take Jesus out, when we take that light out of the situation. Anyway, I was struck by that this week as I was trying to relate that to the Transfiguration. That I think the Transfiguration reveals to us that immensity of the light of Christ, of the light of God, the dazzlingness, if that's a word, of Jesus, right? And that we don't have to do anything except not take Jesus out, right? It's not that hard. We just have to not take Jesus. Jesus is there. We just have to not take Jesus out.
Always there.
Yeah, always. That's the default in the cosmos. Anyway, I was kind of struck by that. I thought that was an interesting. It was written by a mystic years ago. Anyway, I was taken aback by that. I thought it an interesting way to approach, especially as we're approaching Lent. We take things out of our lives and all this kind of stuff. To prepare ourselves for Jesus and all that stuff. It's great. But one of the things I think that is most important is just to recognize that Jesus is there, always. That's the default. Is to live in the light. That's what we have to do.
I think this is going to be an interesting lens.
It is going to be interesting. Why is it going to be interesting this year?
Well, because we've already given up a great deal of our life.
We have.
And,
We have.
the church has always been the place where, and especially during the Easter season and Easter, where the church has been the predominant area of my life.
Yeah.
And, in many ways, I feel closer with all the time we've had to think.
Sure.
And in other ways, I kind of miss the world.
Yeah. It's an interesting thought. That we kind of are missing both, right? Both,
Yeah.
The physical presence of church and the physical presence of the world. And how do we balance that? And this Lent will, we started last year. Last year's Lent was kind of the beginning of the pandemic, right? We weren't quite sure yet. So we're a full year in now, right? We're a full church year into the pandemic and starting over again with our Lenten experience. And maybe that offers us a unique opportunity this year to enter into Lent and to say, maybe it's not about giving something up or about losing something, but about recognizing the light, recognizing the presence of God in the cosmos and as the default in all things. And again, not easy, perhaps, but that's an invitation for us this year.
It's not as communal as it's always been.
True. That is true. Then there's not much we can do about that right now. To paraphrase, all will be well. All manner of things shall be well. We just don't know when yet. I had a friend, Roman Catholic priest, who was talking to his congregation that as they're entering Lent, he is really looking forward to Easter as the time of resurrection. And he hopes that in a very real sense, Easter can be a time of resurrection. Right? And not just in it, we often, we talk about that idea of resurrection, but this year, especially so, we can look forward to Easter and maybe being the resurrection of community, right? Maybe at the time, the resurrection of our community life together. So maybe that's something to kind of walk through Lent, anticipating. Is the resurrection. Maybe it doesn't happen on April 4th, the day of Easter. Maybe it doesn't happen on April 11th. Maybe it's May. Maybe it's whatever. But it's still looking forward to the Easter, looking forward to resurrection. In light of in light of Jesus, being the light of the world. But yeah, not easy. Certainly not easy. And it is certainly this will be another unique Lent.
Yeah. Are you going to do drive-by ashes?
We will be doing drive-through Ash Wednesday, yeah. So Wednesday at noon and 7, and then drive-through distribution of ashes at 1 p.m. and 6 p.m. We will have those times of those experiences for us. We will be having our 9 o'clock service as well. I forgot to cancel it. I'm gonna go ahead and have it. I know that Betty and Carol and Fran are all coming, so I didn't want to throw their week into a disarray. So I'm gonna go and do the 9 o'clock service as well.
Good.
But
Yeah, you said you were going to skip the Bible study.
yeah, we'll skip the Bible study this week, mainly because I have to get ready for the noon.
So do we get a preview of ashes or do we have to come back?
Oh no, we'll do ashes. Okay, yeah. Distributed by Q-Tip. Under Episcopal direction, Bishop has asked us to distribute ashes with avoid contact as best we can. We're gonna try and do
Steve.
Well, you know, it's actually one of the options. The Roman Catholic Church, they're sprinkling ashes
Yeah.
this year.
I heard that, and I'm telling that they're just sprinkling.
Yeah, just like take a little, just over the top of the head, just do it again to avoid touch. In some places. That was an option given to us as well. It's a little dirtier.
Yeah. When do you get to wash your hair?
Right, yeah. I'm going to miss the smudging people's foreheads, so I like that.
All the way across.
That's one of the highlights of the priest year. Feel that.
Sure. And then you
Really
have
good
somebody
people.
like Bruce, and you've got all that space you can cover.
I don't know, Bruce, she's giving you a hard time.
That's right.
All right. Yeah. So, all right. Any other thoughts on the transfiguration?
No,
Any other questions about that narrative or that story that might be still in your head?
I got to go, and when I was in Israel, I got to go to what was called the Mound of Transfiguration,
Ah,
Mount Tabor.
okay, well, yeah.
It may or may not be, but it was interesting because,
It's as good a site as any.
yeah, and we went by bus. We could only get halfway up the mountain, and then we had to wait for a limousine to come and pick us up 8 at a time. You know, everybody up there.
You didn't want to walk all the way up?
Well, it was pretty steep by that point.
Excellent.
Yeah, it was interesting. And, you know, you kind of could put yourself there at the time of Jesus.
Great. I've not had the opportunity to go to the Holy Lands, but
If you get to go, if you have the opportunity.
all right, well, thank you. I will see you all
Next one.
next time.
Okay.
Read the ESV.
Sorry, I